Welcome to the BAMTalk podcast, where we bring all kinds of incredible guests together to talk about some awesome topics on how business and missions intersect. Enjoy.
This is take two. We already did take one. You guys missed so much.
Some great stuff.
We'll never be able to recapture that magic.
That's what happens when you don't hit the record button.
And that happens.
Yeah. Rookie mistake.
I'm really actually sad because my friend today lost his job. He got fired from a calendar factory. Do you know why? He took a day off. It's tragic. Yeah.
You know who the most business savvy woman in the Bible is?
No, I don't.
It's Pharaoh's daughter. She went to the Nile Bank and came back with a little profit.
But I made a terrible mistake. And before we hung up, and that is I committed to pray about it. It became absolutely apparent.
We interrupt this program mid-sentence for a trash pickup that apparently could not wait.
Thanks, Alicia. Are we starting? Are we live?
Yeah, we're good. We're live.
We're live. Hey, everybody, we're live. Good to see you.
All righty.
Do you start?
I'll start.
0, 1, 2, 3. Let's get started.
Real good.
Welcome to the BAMTalk podcast.
This is take two. We already did take one. You guys missed so much.
Some great stuff.
We'll never be able to recapture that magic.
That's what happens when you don't hit the record button.
And that happens.
Yeah. Rookie mistake. But we've got it going now. And we're going to get going, and to introduce, I got a great friend of mine, a brother, a friend, a padre.
Compadre.
You're kind of like a padre.
A padre.
Josh Matteson.
That's me.
The founder, the director, CEO, whatever you want to call it, El Presidente of Salt Next Gen Ministries. And for those of you who don't know, Salt Next Gen is our partnered ministry at BAMCO. So I have a vested interest in Salt Next Gen. I've been able to be part of the journey up to this point. I work for Salt Next Gen. And I love it, obviously, and I'm excited about BAMCO being able to make an impact, not just in people's lives and not just in people's homes, but in the ministry, especially through funding. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But to start, Josh, why won't you just give us like a little overview of SALT, just a 50,000 foot overview of SALT for all.
So Salt Next Gen Ministries, it exists to train and send the next generation to the nations. What we mean by that is we're focused on the next gen, that is 16 to 26-year-olds, high school and college students. We want to recruit them, we want to equip them, we want to train and send them out to work alongside seasoned missionaries all over the world. So we do this in partnership with a lot of different missionaries and mission organizations. And the vision, the ultimate vision of where we're heading this is that we want to be part of a movement that will see 10,000 students go to the nations by 2040. We want to be part of that. We know that it's not just us. Many of our mission partners, many of the churches that come alongside of us, we all are seeing the same thing. We're all praying for the same thing. And that is a great revival, a great movement of God to raise up and to see 10,000 students go to the nations by 2040.
And before we get in, we're going to break this down a little bit, but I believe the numbers are somewhere probably north at this point of 450 students that we've trained in the last several years.
Yeah, I think we're close to about 500. So
about 500 students that we've trained and we've sent at some capacity. We're going to get into that and talk about really what SALT does, the programs that SALT offers. But that's across, 17, 18 nations, something like that?
Yeah, I think we're
getting there, and we got partners all over the world. In fact, I don't know that there's many places in the world that we don't have a great partner, missions partner that we can send people to.
It's true. In fact, we have, and most people might not be surprised by this. Some might be. We have more partners and more opportunities than we have been able to recruit and train, and send students to. There are opportunities in literally places that a lot of people never even heard of, but where there's a need for workers, gospel workers, people to come and to serve and to be part of what God's doing.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
We're going to get back and talk a little more about Salt Next Gen and all that stuff. But first, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what ultimately brought you to the point that we ended up meeting and you moved to Nashville, which is a crazy story in and of itself, an amazing testament of faithfulness and obedience. But just give us a little overview of who you are and what God's done in your life up to that point.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity always to tell my story, and it's amazing to think what God's done in my life. As I look back on it, I have the opportunity to tell my story. There's a lot to my story, but the basic elements of it is that I grew up in a Christian home, in a ministry family. My dad was a minister. My grandfather was a pastor his entire career. And so I grew up around church. I grew up around the gospel. I grew up reading the Bible and memorizing the Bible and praying with in the church within our family. So I grew up around all of that. But when I as I got close to being a teenager, my own family experienced a lot of issues, a lot of problems, and our whole family life kind of cratered, and led to me leaving home when I was 16 and moving out on my own. And a lot of things happened. A lot of things. I got caught up with the wrong crowd. I got just in a bad situation, and I really was literally wandering, and at some point homeless. And my life was really kind of unraveling. It was in the worst part, as things got to the very worst, where God came in mercy and grace and pursued me. And I think there's elements of my story that are similar to your story, and I think that's part of where we kind of bond and connect, is because we know what it's like to be at the very end of ourselves. And so God in mercy and grace and love came to me, and when I became a Christian truly for the first time when I was 20 years old, and the gospel became alive to me, and God's grace became real to me. I knew one of the things I've been fighting my whole life was that I knew God wanted me to serve Him, and I didn't want to serve Him. But now all that had changed, and I was ready to serve Him. I wanted to give Him my whole life. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know where that would take me, but I knew I needed to train for that. And so I had to travel halfway across the country from where I had been living. I left to go to Bible college, and that's where I met my wife. That's really where I was discipled in that context in church and in Bible college. And my wife and I both were very, very excited about missions. It was a church and a ministry that was very into world missions, and we had a passion for the nations, and we have a love for people, especially people that are different from us. And so we'd really been thinking about what it would look like for us to go overseas. But the Lord started to do things in our life, and we began to just think about planting a church in the U.S., and then that went from planting a church in the U.S. to planting a church in the city where we lived, which was at this time Phoenix, Arizona. And so after college, we started to have a family, and we got involved in the church. Ended up becoming a pastor, assistant pastor, youth pastor for 7 years at a church, and then I became the senior pastor of that church. And we were at that church for 20 years, and we had an incredible ministry, and many good things happened as a result of being at that church. And that youth ministry season that I had for 7 years was nothing I ever sought out. I didn't think I was cut out for youth work. I didn't want to work with youth, and I had actually turned it down several times. But then the Lord burdened my heart for young people. I started to work with young people. Our youth ministry grew. We started this program called SALT, which at the time was an acronym, Student Action Leadership Training. And the whole idea was it was for young people in our youth group who wanted more than what they were getting on Sundays and in the midweek training time that we did. This was a time for them to learn how to do discipleship and for them to learn about missions. And so that little program grew. It was a year-round program for high school students, which we would train them for a year, then we would go do a mission trip. That started in about 2003, and that quickly grew from just being students in our church to other students from other churches started to hear about that, and they wanted that extra training as well. And so we'd routinely have 15 to 20 students go through that program, go on a mission trip. We just saw a lot of success. In fact, we invested all these years into the students who went through that, who graduate from college, or they graduate from high school, they go to college, they get into careers, they get married, they stick around, and they end up serving in our youth ministry, and they end up even helping us with SALT. And those same students, some of them would end up being part of our church leadership and even help us go out later and plant a church. We planted a church. After 20 years in one place, we branched out and planted a church in 2017. And we still felt the need to keep doing SALT and to keep this training going. In 2019, we made SALT a nonprofit organization, and we called that nonprofit organization SALT Next Gen Ministries. And we called it Ministries because we felt like there'd be a lot of ways in which we could invest and go after young people. We just hadn't thought about all the ways that could look like. We had a burden for it. We were fully involved in church planning, and we were still training young people. But we started a nonprofit, really just to keep the book separate from what we were doing with SALT and what our church was doing.
Just for anyone that comes across this, if you don't know it already, God loves you. And there's no one that's too far gone for Christ. And
I think there's a lot of people who get to the point of feeling like all their decisions have trapped them. And I remember feeling that way. And the harder I tried to cling to things in life, the more they slipped from me. And you just end up getting sucked in this whirlpool, this black hole of self, and what the Bible calls sin, is this brokenness and all the devastation and destruction we wreak on ourselves and we do on others. But you're right, no one is ever too far gone from the grace of God. God pursues us in love, and He is a Savior. This is what Jesus does. He saves us from ourself, from our sin, from our brokenness, and rebuilds lives.
And people need to know that. And not just you guys. There's people across the world. There's a lot of people who have the gospel being deposited into their life in a lot of different avenues. They've got friends, they got family, they got mentors that are doing that, and it's up to them ultimately to make that decision. Like you said,
that's right.
It was hard for you. You felt that call, but you didn't want to be obedient. My story is no different. I never questioned whether God was real. I never even really questioned whether He was good. But what I did question is whether it was worth it for me to give up what I knew I needed to give up, the cost of discipleship. And it's because I questioned His goodness. And people need to know that. And there's people out there that they have that being deposited into their lives, and they've got to make that decision. Right. But there's also people that don't have that in any area of their life. They're depositless. And there are people out there that have no access to the gospel, literally no access to the gospel. They never heard the word of Jesus, or it's limited and it's restricted, and there's persecution that comes with it in ways that as Americans we don't comprehend, because we have this freedom that we take for granted. And so we want to share that gospel with people, but it's also it's important that we send people to do that, and to do it faithfully, and to do it well, and to understand how to do it. And that's where SALT comes in. So to kind of pick back up, you started Student Action Leadership. It became SALT Next Gen. It became its own 501c3 entity in Phoenix, Arizona. And at that point, you had been asked to step into a role for another ministry as the interim director at the time, a ministry out of Nashville. And in that time period, I had started to work with that ministry.
That's right.
So how did we get to know each other? Tell about that.
It's very interesting. My wife and I were privileged to have 3 sons who we're very proud of. They're all married now. They're doing great. And my middle son had joined a missions program because we had such a heart for missions. And I first took him overseas when he was 16. And we had such a passion for this. And as a pastor, as a church planter, we were very involved in missions, not just with our training young people, but our church was heavily invested in overseas missions. So I was able to do a lot, and was able to bring my son along into those things. Well, he got such a heart for that, he joined a program that was based here in Nashville, or a ministry that was based here in Nashville, which we were so glad that he did. And then, yes, I was invited to help out the ministry, which, of course, we had such a heart for missions and a willingness to help. So we were happy to step in and be a help during a time that the organization needed that. And that is when we first met. And, getting in the organization, starting to dream and talk about how the organization could get healthy and grow and develop things, you could just sense that as we talked about that. And this organization that needed help at the time, just how Will and I would talk about it and just come alive, and the opportunities and the ideas and the dreams that we had. But it was a short stint. It was just 4 months long. It ended, and that was fine. I was just trying to help. I was, again, in Phoenix, fully involved in church planting, didn't think much more else about it, but just glad to help a missions organization.
Yeah, and as that mission started to go in a different direction, which is a great direction, it just wasn't the direction that our hearts were pulled towards, and we realized that there was a need that wasn't being met at the time. So explain that need. What is the need that led to Salt Next Gen as it is today, and ultimately led to you after how many years in Phoenix?
27 years.
27 years, packing up your stuff pretty quickly and moving across country.
It's crazy. I always try to, as I tell the story to people, it's hard to condense it, because God did so many things in our lives, in my wife and I, as just in our own marriage and thinking about that. But my wife had been telling me for years that she thought we ought to do more with SALT, and I ought to write more curriculum. We ought to develop more training, and I'd always kind of pushed back against her, saying, yeah, I'd love to do that. I don't have time necessarily to do that right now, and maybe at some point, once we get this new church going, we'll dedicate time to that. And I said, maybe even in the second half of our life, it'll all be about that. I guess now is the second half of my life. But when that ministry started to go a different direction, and you reached out to me and said, hey, we had such a great time talking and dreaming and working together. And you had mentioned how, and I'll remember this always, you said you hadn't moved, because you moved too, to come to Nashville. You hadn't come to Nashville for the organization, but for the mission. And you saw that I had that same heart for that mission, and would I ever consider and would ever think about taking what we had with SALT and replanting it in Nashville. And the reason why, why leave Phoenix, why come to Nashville? There was a group of people that had been at the heart of a work here already, international people. And there was a lot of refugees coming to Nashville, it still is. And the city was growing. And there were real opportunities here with churches that were hungry to partner and work in this area. And so, you put it to me, and at the time we were talking, I just thought, this is just another thing, but man, I got to stay focused on what I'm doing. But I made a terrible mistake, and before we hung up, and that is I committed to pray about it. And I'll tell you what, and again, it's hard to explain all that happened in the weeks that followed that, but in the weeks and month or two that followed our conversation, the Lord started bringing, I would have missionaries call me up from the blue. I would have conversations with leaders, with students. All these things started happening, and we saw the Lord begin to pull together a group of people. I'd always believed in ministry with a team. I never wanted to do anything alone. And so I was excited because all the pieces of a great team, the building blocks of a great team, were here. And God started to bring more people into that. And a board was starting to form. And there were just exciting things. So it became 100% clear to my wife and I both, after a relatively short season of prayer, that God was calling us to leave. It became one of those moments in life where I can tell you, I knew 100% God wanted us to do it, and I knew if I didn't do it, I would be disobedient. And that was tough because we hadn't planned for that. We hadn't been thinking that. That wasn't on our radar, even though it was a conversation that was more kind of had been pushed off. But it became so clear that I knew I had to obey that. And we'd really put roots down. You know, my wife and I had traveled, both of us were in families that were kind of itinerant. We moved a lot. And this is the longest either of us had lived anywhere. Was Phoenix, and raised a family there. And now by the Lord's grace, our boys had grown up. They were out of the house. We were just starting our empty nest phase of life. And so it was just God's goodness and timing, everything. It became so obvious. And so we made the move out here in the summer of 2021.
It's like the story of Nehemiah, where he goes and he rebuilds this wall. He wasn't a great builder, but Sanballat, after trying to get him to get off that wall, and he refused, he kept saying, "I'm doing a great work, and I will not come down," decides he's going to go force him down, right? And so he circles the wall to look for the weak spot and runs away in fear. And it's not because he's a really good builder, we can't penetrate this wall. It's the progress that was made was evidently the work of God, and it scared him. He didn't want to mess with it.
Right.
And so I just look at what we've been through in a relatively short amount of time and where we're going and what God has done and will, I know, continue to do. It reminds me of that. It's a testament of God's goodness and his faithfulness, and you can't take credit for it, what we've seen. And so kind of with that, what have you seen God do so far with the growth and kind of what's on the horizon for Salt?
What's so cool is that when we talk about this, since 2021, it's only been like 3 years. In fact, as of this month, it's been exactly 3 years since we made that move. And over the last 3 years, we have seen God do incredible things. Again, we had people, we had personnel that we knew that we could start something with. And so it was just all about let's start developing a training. Let's start connecting with churches. We have this deep philosophy, one of our deep held values in our organization that, we don't look at ourselves as a church. We're not the church. God's plan, we always say God's plan A for reaching the world is through the church. It's the church's mission. The Great Commission belongs to the church and every believer in the church, right? And so we don't see ourselves as a replacement for that. We see ourselves as an organization that's called to come alongside and help the church do what her mission is. And the church has a great untapped potential with the young people that it has in the church. They're not just the church of the future, they're the church of now. They're the people who can go out now and reach the nations. In fact, they have the least amount of commitments and things that would prohibit them and keep them and slow them down. They have the most latitude. They have the most margin to go and do that, and definitely the most energy. And there's a teachability there. So it's so exciting when you can come alongside churches and help them to see their young people, not as a group of people you have to entertain and keep busy and keep after and keep them from getting into trouble, but as a strategic group to build ministry around and build into. I constantly think, young people, there's a lot they don't know, and there is immaturity, and there's all this stuff. But they can learn, they can go out, they can do things. The Great Commission is not restricted to people that are, older and have other careers and everything. It's for every believer. And so we need to we need to really raise up that group of people to send them out, let them do the work. And so what we've seen God do here is we've seen the ability, we've been able to build relationships. We've built relationships with churches here. We built relationships and started to do outreach in the community. Now, this is what's amazing about Nashville. One of the things that was obvious to us, Nashville isn't the largest city by any stretch. It's not the most diverse city by any stretch. But what's incredible is there's 90 different people groups in Nashville. And 41 of those people groups are what we would identify, what missiologists would call unreached people groups. In other words, these people came from other places, they've ended up here in Nashville, but where they've come from, the people group, they have this ethnically distinct group of people from where they are on the other side of the planet or wherever they've come from. They haven't been reached by the gospel. There's not enough Christians within that people group to evangelize their own people group. They need help from the outside. And it's hard to send missionaries. These are some places that are very restricted access places. It's hard for Americans to get in there. It's hard for them to keep a low enough profile. It's very expensive. It's very difficult. And so, not to make excuses, we need to send missionaries to all these places, and we're trying to do that.
And the crazy thing about this
Yeah.
is that God in His sovereignty has brought these nations.
He's brought them here
to us.
So in God's goodness, if the church is struggling to get somewhere, well, He'll work through world events to bring them to us, and He brings them here to places like Nashville and other cities throughout North America and throughout the West in Europe.
And these are those depositless people that I talked about. And so what's crazy is already in the story of Salt Next Gen is what originally was, we're going to train these young people, and it's not for everyone, but we're going to train them, and we're going to train them thoroughly with really solid training. We're going to talk about that in a minute, what that looks like for us and how we're a little unique, I think, across other student missions organizations and how we do that. But it went from we're going to train them here and send them there to now we're going to train them here amongst these same people. And it's a breeding ground for training and experience that is unmatched and allows us to then send a quality of a student, of a young missionary. And we've seen just the aid that has brought overseas to our partners is exponentially greater. And in the process of doing that, what's the most incredible thing when I think about what I've seen God do so far, because there's so many amazing things with SALT, but through these relationships we've made, through discipling some of these young refugees, that we're not just training young Americans, we're training young international students. And it's allowed us to even start a scholarship fund, which is amazing. We just sent a young Afghan believer, came to Christ in his journey as a refugee in India as he was displaced from Afghanistan, became a believer, his whole family. They ended up in Louisville. We find this guy, and we are able to support him to go through one of our gap year programs. So he comes to Nashville and he spends a whole semester getting trained thoroughly and then doing ministry in Nashville amongst these refugee pockets of people with our staff, a lot of whom are refugees themselves. And then we were able to send him overseas to Egypt, and he spent his spring semester serving Sudanese refugees, Muslim refugees, same background he came from as far as a Muslim background. And he's back now. I talked to his brother recently, and I don't know if I told you, but Yazdan just was raving about how he's like the spiritual leader of their house. He was kind of the baby as far as his spiritual kind of walk. And he comes through this program, and not only did he have a huge impact on people that he came across, but it had an even greater impact on him. And his family just says it's a totally new Melvin.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. And we got another guy from
originally from Burma, but he grew up in Thailand. His family came here as refugees. He had a really rough time as a young person, and then even got into real trouble as a teenager. But God saved him and called him to ministry. And he's in the middle of one of our other training programs, and we just took him over to Egypt, and had an amazing time there. And he's exploring future ministry opportunities.
How old is he?
22.
22, and just this incredible story that again, as Americans, it's hard for us to understand.
It is. But I see these, so, as we're reaching students, or we're training students, high school students, college students, we have different ministry, different programs that we have to train students with a different length of time and training, different length of service time overseas. But it's exciting when you get students who've come from the nations, learn how to bring the gospel to the nations, and they end up going back out. It's one of the most exciting, thrilling things we have, and we really believe that a big part of the future of missions in the West is going to, all these people that have come, what we call them diaspora people who have been scattered from their homeland. All these people have been scattered, many of them forcibly scattered. It's not like they chose to leave. They were forced out by war, by terrorism, by persecution. These people have been scattered, who've ended up coming to the West, coming to North America, coming to places like Nashville. They get saved. They hear the gospel. They become new in Christ, and they know God's calling them to serve Him. The future of missions is going to be very diverse as far as the ethnic makeup of missionaries, and we believe a lot of them are going to be raised up and trained up. I love the quote that I came across. Of course, not my quote, but I heard it. It's great. I can't remember who said it, but the mission field has become the mission force. And we see that right here. We know that's true in other cities as well. And we're like, look, we want to raise up, we want to train 16 to 26-year-olds, and it doesn't matter what their ethnic background is or where they've come in the world. We want to raise them up. And a lot of them don't have the financial resources to do what other students might have, but having a scholarship fund makes that happen so that we can actually train them and deploy them.
First, and we'll get into the training and what makes our training unique. Certainly, you're a big part of that as a trainer. Your background as a professor, right, helps with that. And not just that, but how that ties into our academic partners. We'll talk about that. But first, will you just kind of give a quick synopsis of the different programs that we have?
Yeah, so we have what we call our GO teams. Well, let me back up. We have our advanced teams. For the high school students, we offer a mission trip experience, a 7 to 10 day, even a 2-week overseas cross-cultural ministry experience for high school students. We love it when churches get a hold of us and say, hey, can you train our students before we launch? And can you even go with our students when we launch? But can you find a place for us to go and learn about ministry and experience another culture and see the gospel in action in another place? So we do that for high school students. We do the same thing for college students. We call those GO teams, Global Outreach Teams. And we have a training, because we get students from all over the nation, we have an online training we do for those students. That's 7 sessions, 7 sessions where we train them about missions, about how to share the gospel, about how to do ministry cross-culturally, about how to stay healthy spiritually overseas. We do a bunch of stuff to equip students. We really want to give them solid training. We do that for our GO team students. We give them that training, and then we send them out overseas so they can, again, they're never just going anywhere on their own. We're always doing this in partnership with great organizations, with seasoned missionaries. They can get on the field and they can learn from those missionaries. We were just in Egypt a couple weeks ago with a GO team, and what I love about that is that there's people living and working there that we get to come alongside. We get to see their passionate love for the people that they're embedded with. Our students get exposed to people who've given their whole life to love and serve in another place. And so we do that for GO teams. We have another program called Summer Serve. It's our summer internship program. That's usually 6 to 8 weeks long in the summer. We have a student over, for instance, in Austria right now, working with a ministry that's right next to the second largest refugee camp in Europe. And he's there sharing the gospel, building relationships with people who've come from parts of the world where it's definitely not, Christianity is not the majority religion. It's Islam or Hinduism. And they've come fleeing violence, war, persecution, ended up in a refugee camp. And here they're meeting this young man who's serving them, building relationships with them, helping them to learn basic things, but sharing the gospel. We've been able to send students all over the world who've done internships every summer. Then we have what we call our Gap Year program. This is a residential training program. So with advanced teams, we can come to churches and train. We can do training online. GO teams, we do that training online because those are students usually from everywhere. Summer Serve, students from everywhere. We do that training online as well. 7-session training, pre-deployment. Then we have a residential training, and that's when we actually bring students here to Nashville, embed them with our team that's doing ministry in and among different people groups that are here, usually unreached people groups that are here. We embed them with a team, and we have a 14-week training program. So our Gap Year is 4 months here stateside in the fall semester, like a college semester. They're here in Nashville, and then we send them overseas in the spring semester for 3 to 4 months. And so we bring students here. They go through 14 weeks of training. There's 4 different training tracks they get: character and calling, evangelism, discipleship, cross-cultural communication and understanding, leadership, and team dynamics. We do classroom training, and then we put them out in the field where they work, they serve, they learn how to do cross-cultural ministry with refugees, a lot of them with refugees, because refugees have not acculturated to Western culture. They're still adjusting, so they're still living and operating very much as they would overseas. So we go into those settings and we learn how to do ministry cross-culturally in those settings.
Well, also, and to throw in, also having the opportunity, the tremendous opportunity that's so often overlooked to reach these people that are coming from these unreached people groups, like we talked about, and the impact that one of those coming to Christ has on a whole nation of people back home can be greater than a whole team of Americans or Westerners that we send overseas. Now, that's important, and we're still doing that. But our ultimate goal is that in doing that, we're also discipling people here. And we've got an amazing team.
This is the best part of it is our team.
We got
our team makes that happen.
Amazing team here that's diverse, that's doing that year-round. They're sustaining ministry, just like we got missionaries overseas that when our students leave, the ministry continues. Same thing happens with our team. We got a guy from India, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about a breakdown of our team.
We have a great team. They all come from diverse backgrounds. They all come with great experience. They're coming from the places where we want to send missionaries. So you mentioned we have a guy who just joined our team. He's our South Asia outreach specialist. And so he actually has come over on a religious worker visa that we applied for him to get him here. He led a church planning and leadership training network in India. He's come over to help us reach people from India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. That's South Asia. He's here for the next 2 years to help us reach people who've come from those places and they've ended up here. He also we have a burden to develop a network, a leadership network for leaders, ministry leaders who are from those backgrounds. So he's here to help us do that. We have a young man who came here as a refugee from Rwanda who has an incredible ministry where he's with 50 to 80 young refugees every week in a Bible study. He leads he's our African outreach specialist. We have a man from Central Middle East who's come with his family. He came here as refugees. They're serving the Lord. They are sharing the gospel with people from some of the most difficult countries on the planet, the most hardest to reach people groups on the planet. And he's working on our team to help us reach those people that have all come here as refugees because of all the wars and all the violence from right in the middle of the Middle East. And then we have added to our team here in this last year our Latin American outreach specialist who was a missionary in Mexico for 20 years, a pastor here in Tennessee, and has now joined this team because he wants to be training up, raising up leaders from among the Latin American Spanish-speaking world, helping to mobilize churches, helping to get our training into Spanish so we can actually do the things we're doing with churches and with young people in Spanish. Yeah, that leads me to we have these are our different training programs. We also have a longer term thing that's longer than our gap year where students come and do 4 months stateside here with our Nashville team, and then they get deployed for 1, 2, 3 years. We call that Mission Corps. Yeah. So we have these. We also have local church-based training as well. We do something called a cultural encounter experience, and that's where we actually train churches in worldview. We give them training in evangelism. We help them understand the plight of refugees and to really open their eyes and see the nations that have come to the city. We get them out. We get them to go to a mosque and meet the imam and hear from them. Go to a Hindu temple, a Buddhist temple, and do the same. It's really a great exposure opportunity for churches, for youth groups, for college ministries, for anybody at any age to come and actually learn. And so we routinely get groups from around our area and even outside of Tennessee come to do mission trips here to go through that training and learn. We're actually getting a team here tomorrow that's coming from out of state to go through a 3-day training with us. So it's one of the most exciting things to do is just get churches excited and learning about how to reach the nations in their own backyard.
We had a team from Michigan come, and it was in the dead of winter, and we were all worried about how we were going to handle the cold. Right. We had to stop and realize they're from Michigan.
They're like, we're fine, we're wearing shorts.
This is summer for them. But yeah, it's been a great journey. And before we wrap up, just to kind of touch on what makes us unique. Training is definitely an aspect of that. You were a professor of theology, yes, right, at Grand Canyon University for how many years?
4 years.
4 years. But you've got that background. You're an incredible teacher. You're an incredible communicator. you probably won't always admit that the way that you are. It's a gift of yours. And anyone that steps into a training session with you is blessed to be able to have that experience. But we got so many amazing trainers on our staff. But because of your background, you knew how to write this in a curriculum in such a way. You knew what schools and what universities needed. And so what's really exciting that's happened in the last really year is that it went from 1 to 2 to 3. Next thing you know, it's like a domino effect of these universities and these colleges that have started to offer college credit. So these students can go through our training program for different programs, and they can actually receive college credit for it.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing.
One of the most exciting things about our summer serve, about our gap year and mission corps, is that students can get that training. They can do it for credit. And we have students who go through our gap year, they go on to university, and they're getting 15 hours of college credit while they've done a year of ministry, and they've grown up and they've seen the world, and they've learned a lot about missions, and they've been very active in ministry. They've been able to do all that, and they walk away with 15 hours of college credit as they start their collegiate career. We just think that's so important that we realize we've got an opportunity to reach people, to train young people and give them a depth and a quality of training that other schools recognize. There's quality there, and it's something that they can give credit for.
And good universities, too.
Great universities, great colleges and universities, not here in this region, in the Southeast, but also all the way out west as well. And so we're excited to see more and more academic partners jump on board and sign up, because they realize a lot of students are benefited. Their collegiate careers are going to be a lot richer experience when they take time between high school and college to really do something outside of themselves, really learn and grow by doing a missions experience like this and get this kind of training.
Obviously, with BAMCO, we're partnered with you. And so what does that look like as a partner? Well, one, it's creating a ministry opportunity. And let's take a step back from the business side of things. We're going to have a whole podcast on business missions. I'm excited for you guys to hear. We're going to break that down. But you got to have a successful business. So we're going to put that aside. That's a given, right? But through that successful business, there's a lot of incredible things that can happen through a business that is functioning like a business for missions. And I'm going to get more in depth at a different podcast for that. But a big part of that is creating a ministry opportunity with BAMCO, that I have an opportunity as an owner of BAMCO to bring in a bunch of refugees, a bunch of international people that come from these backgrounds that I can put into these crews. They may be seasoned and experienced in that field and that trade, and maybe they have no experience at all, but I get to put them alongside professionals in a training environment and provide employment, which is one of the most important aspects of helping and aiding these refugees in the immediate sense. But in the eternal sense, I get to disciple them every single day, and I get to put a team around them, a leadership team of project managers and leads that love the Lord, and they embrace this as much more than just a general contracting company.
I just got to stop. Imagine that model. Imagine if we were to replicate that model in cities and communities all over the U.S. with that same heart. Imagine how many people we could reach and serve through that way, and help lives get built by that intentionality. So we love that's what you're doing.
But in addition, this is why you guys should go get work done from us, is that in addition to great quality work, right? A good
work.
Business, professional business, in addition to that, in addition to making an impact in people's lives, that 15% of all profit on every job gets to go directly to SALT, and an unrestricted, which I think is so important. It's hard to raise money enough. It's even harder to get unrestricted funds, but knowing SALT, knowing you, knowing where our focus and priority is, to be able to give unrestricted gifts out of the blessing we have in work that we find, for SALT to do what they're doing and all the amazing things on the horizon, scholarship funds, training opportunities, just all these amazing opportunities for growth. My goal and my plan for BAMCO is much more than just a home that can be made beautiful, right? Obviously, I want to help make your dream come to a reality, but I believe that while you can see a difference with our company, as we say is one of our slogans, you can also make a difference through using our company. And with that, that's my plan for BAMCO. But what is the plan for BAMCO as far as SALT is concerned, and the opportunity you have with creating a training track and placement of interns?
This is one of the things we love, and what I love about what I do is that there's so many different opportunities to develop. There's so many ways to develop workers. Getting involved in missions, doing ministry and doing overseas missions, it doesn't have to just look like somebody with a Bible going over to the deepest, darkest jungle and toughing it out and preaching the Bible. We still need people doing that, and we hope that everybody goes, and they're all going to take their Bibles, they're all going to preach the gospel. There's lots of different ways to go. And one of the most exciting things that have happened in missions in the last 10, 20 years is this movement toward business as mission. And so the whole idea that you can train people to start businesses and use that as a way to get into a community, to serve a community, to be present in a community, here or overseas, to actually build relationships and employ people and bring value, and then use it as a platform to share your faith.
All while supporting your ministry.
And then you're supporting, it's self-supporting. It takes care of, it's the reason why the person's there.
We have an opportunity to, at BAMCO, to provide job opportunities, but through that we can develop them. Sometimes we can already utilize them. Yep. But everyone I see that we bring on, whether they're a refugee or not, I don't see where they are now. I have to look at that to see where I place them today, but I look at where they could be one day.
Yeah.
And that's the hope and the goal, is that we can professionally develop these refugees into our workforce. Some of them have incredible gifts. Some of them are doctors and lawyers back home, or a lot of the Afghan community. A lot of them are soldiers, and they know how to take a command. They know how to handle pressure. And
it's very true.
And so you take these people and you look beyond what you might see at face value, and you've got a tremendous workforce that is actually eager for a hand up, not a hand out.
What an opportunity! And again, what would it look like if we had businesses that were that intentional? Mushroom up all over North America, all over the U.S. Imagine the impact we could have when people, it's not just giving them the job, which is the incredible thing, not the handout, but the hand up, but creating opportunities of relationships where the gospel can be shared. Yeah, it's amazing.
It is amazing. And to be able to then be in a position to disciple them every single day.
That's right.
It's not just about professionally developing them, but through that, you're able to personally develop them. Most importantly, spiritually develop them.
That's right.
Which is what is most important. And for you guys at home, especially business owners, people that are part of the corporate world, think about this for a second. How much more time do you spend in the work setting with your colleagues or your employees than you do at your own home? It's not because you don't love your home, you don't love your family. That's the nature of corporate America. It's the nature of working. Think about how much more time you spend with your colleagues than at home, and think of the opportunity that you have there. Why is it important to serve the Lord and to reach people? Not everyone is called to be a missionary. You might come across this. Maybe you're a young person and you're like, oh, gap year program, I can get college credit. That's awesome. We want you. We can use you. God can use you. But more importantly, for those of you who that's not in the cards for, especially after praying, because God doesn't call everyone to the mission field the way the world sees the mission field. It's not just an incredible opportunity, it's a command. That's why it's important.
Yeah, I think it's important along that line to remember that we're all called to the same thing. Like the Great Commission is incumbent upon every believer. We're all called to be missional in the way we live our lives. That is, we're living our life on mission. It's on purpose. We're there. Not just to keep the gospel to ourselves or to live our own little life in isolation, but we're there to actually make connections with people. We're there to actually share the gospel in meaningful ways with people. That's what we're all called to. We're just called to do this as communities, as churches, as families of disciples. We're called to be a mission outpost in a place where the gospel needs to be preached, whether they're cities in North America or cities around the world. So yes, Christians have different assignments. For some, the assignment is to go overseas and to live and work there. For others, the assignment is to be a professional or to be a business person or to be a consultant or to be a teacher. God has different assignments, but every Christian is called to obey the great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, love God above everything else, and the Great Commission, go into all the world and make disciples. That's the crucial thing. Make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, teaching them. And that's what every Christian is called. We're all called to be on mission, even though the assignment might not be overseas missionary. We're called to manifest that mission wherever we are.
And for SALT, one of the things that makes you guys so unique is that it's not one size fits all. We recognize students have passions and gifts. How can they work in accordance for the sake of the gospel being brought to these people that desperately need it?
That's right.
We're not a charity.
Right.
We're a ministry that brings gospel truth. But how you do that is not one size fits all. We're partnered with medical missions. We're partnered with education as missions. We're partnered with
sports as missions.
We're partnered with aviation.
Aviation is mission.
We have a partner that uses aviation as a means to bring the gospel. And so one of the goals I have for BAMCO, we've talked about, is a training track for business as missions that you can kind of just briefly touch on.
Yeah. So what we'd love to see, and we're so excited to see this BAMCO get off the ground, because we believe if we can find business partners that understand the opportunity there is to train the next generation, and a group of people from the next generation who have a passion for a particular business or an interest in a particular field, are really good, and they've already got natural skills and abilities in business. Let's give them the skills to start businesses, quality businesses, sustainable businesses that can be used as catalysts for ministry. Because you can start a business overseas for a lot less than you can start it here in the U.S. in many places, especially in places where they're the least reached, the places that need the gospel the most. You can send teams of people to embed in a country, start a business, and that business can be a blessing to its community. It can provide employment, jobs for people in that place. It can create relationships as it does quality work, and it creates integrity. It has a reputation of integrity in the community. It's a way to bless the neighbors that are there in another part of the world, another city in the world, and it's a way to create relationships and to take care of the needs of that missionary team. It can be a self-supporting unit. And so how exciting to see the opportunity. Can we create a training track so students who want to go and start businesses overseas can learn how to do business from a company that's doing that? And then we can, along with all the other training they do, they can learn how to do that, and then we can see them launch and go overseas and start businesses.
And I think the hope there is also that some of these these academic partners are going to be able to partner with us on our curriculum outside of just a Bible track.
Right.
A lot of these universities have theological bent degrees, whether it's biblical studies or whatever. Of course, they see what we do, and it's a great opportunity to partner and give credit. But what about someone in the business school?
Exactly.
Not as much and not at that level, and hopefully this is one of those opportunities. With that, Josh, thank you for coming on this.
Good to be on this, man. It's so fun, and we love serving. We love what BAMCO is doing. We love training the next generation, and we're excited to see what God's going to do.
Yeah, well, hopefully you guys partner with us, partner with SALT. I'm going to link how you can give to SALT if you're interested in giving to SALT. There's always a need, and Josh is so faithful. The whole ministry is so faithful with every dollar they spend. They're incredible stewards, not just of our time and our talents and our treasures, but donors' gifts as well. Something that I love, and it's why I'm so eager to partner. Give to SALT, support SALT. Tons of ways you can do that. There's tons of projects that you can look up and see. I'm going to link that, and then you can also join the family as we say here in Kinyarwandan, Umuryango.
Umuryango.
Family, join the family, join the Umuryango, and you can use us. With BAMCO, I truly stand by what we can do. Not to throw a sales pitch, but I'm going to throw a sales pitch here. You should use us, and you will see a difference. But more importantly, you will make a difference. So thank you. With that, let's pray, and let's close out.